Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Page Turners Plus. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone who has been following Page Turners Plus in all our programs in the past. And for those of you who are just joining us, you can follow us on Facebook and on YouTube as well. It's Page Turners Plus. Today, we'll be reviewing Cherie Jones's How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. And to tell you a bit more about Cherie Jones and the book, we have Francine.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we're discussing How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House, which is the debut novel by Cherie Jones. Cherie Jones is an attorney at law in Barbados and also a writer. Along with How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House, which was nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2021, she's also published a book of short stories. How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House is a novel set in the mid 1980s in an unnamed Caribbean island, which we understand to be Barbados. It addresses the themes of generational trauma, domestic abuse, issues of the dependence on tourism in the Caribbean, and various societal inequities. It's a story that covers difficult topics, but is definitely redeemed by the exquisite writing of Cherie Jones. Over to you, Roger.
Thank you very much. As you said, Francine, it really is exquisite writing, and it covers so many themes. And I think probably a good start off point would be what themes sort of struck anybody by surprise or anybody liked in particular. Paula.
I'm. Maybe you should start with somebody else. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
even.
ma-
I don't mind jumping on this one. I can say something I
yeah.
particularly liked. Yeah, so one of the things I've really loved about the novel actually was the way that she takes a lot of the symbolism that we associate with tourism in Barbados, white sand beaches, the sea, tourism, sun, well, not tourism and tourism, but these kind of like this kind of relatively kind of almost cliche images, and instead of having sort of all the happy things that come in tourism, she takes us down this really dark history, and it's just beautifully done. It's not a story that you would think you would like because of some of the really hard hitting themes that she's tackling, some of the pain that we witness and experience, all the characters experience and we experience with them because you get so attached to the novel. I think that's something that I really like, the way that she uses those images and really turns them upside down, explores the underbelly of tourism, um, and also not just tourism, but also the fact that people live in those spaces.
Mhm.
You know, people are experiencing their actual lives, their first kisses, the people that they fall in love with for the first time in exactly the same spaces that tourists come and party on and go home and
Mm.
remember later. I really enjoyed that about the book.
Thank you for that jump off, Kasua, because I think where I could get Paula in now is that a lot of the focus in the book is on women, and even for the few men who are presented in the book, Aiden, Tone, we realize that they were raised by women and that they don't have many father roles or men in their lives. What do you make of that? And the way that Cherie Jones treats it as well. Um, did you like that, or did you appreciate that sort of writing? Did it take away from the story?
I was confused by the fact that neither Aiden nor Tone had an identifiable father, and I was also confused by the fact that Cherie Jones treated it as if it was not even an issue. Um, and then the father figure, whom we know, um, is a horrible human being. um, yeah, fathers weren't treated very nicely in the novel. I don't know. Maybe the rest of you could tell me what you make of that. I mean, there were positive. There was one positive. No, there were a couple of positive men, but fathers. The only father we knew of was Colson. Is that his name? Um,
Carson?
Carson.
Carson.
Carson. Carson.
Right, and he certainly was not an exemplary father.
That's
In fact,
putting it very
quite
mildly.
quite the opposite.
Mm.
And then other people just didn't have fathers. I don't know if the rest of you had any thoughts about that.
You
I'll
know,
be
I
honest.
didn't miss them.
Yeah, I'd be honest
Going
to say
Francie.
that it didn't really jump out at me until Roger asked the question. There was one positive father actually, Dr. Thomas, was it, that
Oh,
Aiden's
yes.
mother worked for. He
Hmm.
was definitely positive father, and I would say that, well, Mira's
Mira's husband,
father,
Mira's husband as well was
Mira's
a good
husband as well,
Peter.
right, Peter,
Yeah, he
and
was a
And
good
there's
Mira's
also
father.
the other
father
doctor
was
right at the end.
right. Mira's father was maybe not the best because he obviously he had a different family that was not, but he didn't seem to be this totally tormented, awful character like Carson, for example.
Yes, but then he discards Mira after he
Right.
gets a legitimate
It was,
family.
yes, yes.
And is there
Um,
something
So
about class and fatherhood in the novel as well? Because
right.
the reality is that the working class characters have no parents or no father, sorry. But actually, the fathers we have are all the middle class ones. They're the doctors. There's the lawyer father who is not a great dad, but he is a present dad at least.
Well,
Um,
that's the issue, I think, and this, this is a current, it's a constant theme that we read um, in African American literature and Caribbean literature. It reminded me, and again, before I say anything else, I do agree with that. Well, like Francine, it didn't jump, off the page to me. Maybe it's because that's a context that I grew up not in my
Mm,
house. My daddy was there, um, but my friends. I was the only one in my close friend group that had a father in the house. So
mhm,
I was used to no daddies at home. They were doing they were doing their thing. Some of them were in jail and they were doing their thing. But it didn't jump out at me. But when I read it, it did remind me of a scene in J.D. Smith's Swing Time, when the unnamed narrator, when she was a little girl, she catches her best friend's daddy pushing another baby, and he was with another woman, and she
mhm,
went back home and was like, I saw Tracy's daddy and blah blah blah. And
mhm,
her mama like stopped her and gave her a mini history lesson about slavery and family separation and that sort of thing,
mhm,
almost explaining the phenomena in the current day, which actually that novel is set around the same time. At least part of the novel is set around the same time that how the one armed sister sweeps her house. So it's interesting how two different writers from two different backgrounds, they chew on the same type of meat, we might say,
mhm.
mhm,
in terms of uh, these fathers not being in the house, and then how that affects the sons and also the daughters too.
Although, do we think that in this book we missed the fathers? I didn't get the impression that like any of the male characters missed their fathers, and we know that Esme and Lala certainly didn't wish they had theirs. So I'm not sure
mhm,
yeah,
that it.
Kessel, I agree with you because I didn't see any suggestion in the novel that any of the difficulties that, say, Tone or Aiden experienced had anything to do with the absence of fathers. That is why it puzzled me.
Yeah,
Um,
mm,
yeah,
she doesn't cling to that pathology of like black absent black fatherhood. She doesn't make it a pathology. It's just a reality. And I think
yes.
perhaps that's why for us we barely notice. It's like, yeah, I know people that didn't have a dad. That's not
right.
unusual for
Yeah.
me.
So
Yeah,
the,
I tend to agree with the treatment that Kessel is describing. The cheat just took it for granted that that's the reality of. And Kessel, you did mention about the class situation where fathers are present in this novel are people of a different class than the main characters, and as Eric said, that's a common theme. Um, so I guess I'm saying yes, Paula. There was a clear, stark, you know, missing of fathers, and no reference really made to that as being a reason for all these strange behaviors, if for want of a better word, but
mm,
the violent types, the unsettled minds, the relationships that were turbulent. Um, what was the role of the absent father in that? She really doesn't discuss it, but
And
Nor
did
does
she?
she seem
But
to
then,
think there is a rule.
but
If you,
then, are we
Mhm.
saying that the fathers were absent from the story or absent from their lives? Because it leaves you to sort of guess. Because it's absent from the story, but it leaves you to wonder if they were absent from their lives, or maybe they were so insignificant that they weren't worth the final cut of the novel. I don't know.
Mhm.
you
I
know,
also think.
interestingly, if I may just interject, interestingly, and I sorry, but I did have the benefit of speaking to Sherry, and I know you guys will as well. She's been criticized a bit in Barbados for that negative portrayal of men. Um, she's had that as a critique
Is she being
where
criticized by men?
men, yeah, that,
It's an important question.
yeah, by by men.
Women, yes.
So I guess other people have noticed that the male characters in the book, most of them are really not people that you want to take home with you, right? And I guess
But
the
there
men,
are some
yeah,
some very positive characters.
Mhm,
Um, Grayson is a positive character.
mhm.
It's
Um,
paternalistic.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
he's a positive character. Tone has his problems, but
He's a lovely character, I think.
what she shows is that he has his problems. He's a complex individual, but he's an individual who is capable of love.
Mhm,
Um, so I quite liked the way she treated Tone.
Can I just say as well? I wonder if Cherie Jones is doing something like I mentioned right at the beginning about this kind of inversion of tropes, and instead of,
mhm,
like we said, blaming the absent father for the problems in the book, instead she actually draws attention to the present father in the character of Carson and the damage he does. How much of the unhappiness experienced by Lara and Esme is down to Carson, and actually down to Wilma as well. So I wonder if there's something actually really clever going on. She's not pointing out the problems with the absent father. She's pointing out problems with the negative father who is present.
Right.
Hmm,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
interesting.
tend to agree with
which is a great point to make because people are always talking about, oh, the parents should stay together for the good of the child, but is that
Mm-mm,
actually true
mm-mm.
in all cases, right? So
No,
you have a
sir.
father who's present, but he's a disgusting human being. It's definitely not in your interest for him to be around.
Hmm.
And the source of a lot of the pain that three generations of the women in the story feel.
Right,
Like the damage that one person can do is immeasurable. Is kind of
right,
the argument she makes through that character.
right. And he was seen as, I mean, in the society, he was a good, upstanding man of property, which is why Wilma was married off to him, right? He went to church and everything.
that.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
he's a demon.
And then, even what sort of made me I don't know, upset to some extent was, and it's true. It's not as if it's false, but the way that Wilmer was so dependent on Carson, even in his old age when they were hosing him down. I'm sorry, sorry for the spoiler. Sorry for the spoiler. When they were
That
treating
ain't
him
no
badly,
spoiler.
um, and when they needed funds, I'm not going to say what they needed funds for. She went to the bank and got his pension money to use towards some expenses, some funeral expenses. So I think it showed a dynamic. Even though you had Carson, who was just terrible, he had all this property, he was getting money, he had pension, and it showed the reliance on it, and it showed why Wilma stayed in an abusive relationship, not just for herself, but for her children,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's sad.
But economic abuse was one of the things that
Right.
Sherry discussed in, well, Sherry's not my friend, Cherie Jones touched on in the book because, um, first of all, Wilma is married off to Carson when she's 14.
Hmm.
Where would she get economic independence?
Right.
She does create a career for herself, but there is no opportunity really for her to develop in economic independence. Then Lala, huh, Lala's she tries to create economic independence, and Aiden
Takes that away
Aiden
from her.
yeah,
Right.
Aiden takes it away from her, and then also sort of accuses her of stealing his manhood
Right.
by earning money. So I think that is one of the things she is, and another theme concerning women and money is Mira, who marries for money,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then Mira's mother, who is upset that Mira marries for money. So I think she's talking about she treats that very, very, very well. I think
Mhm.
the complex relationship between men, women, and money.
And
Yeah,
the
I mean,
dependency it creates.
Mira did more than just marry for money before she got married. She did
Oh
other things
yes, oh
for
yes,
money.
she earned
So yes,
money in
she
a
earned money.
in
Yes,
yes
you know,
in she
because
mhm, she
that was. I mean, I hesitate to use the word choice. That was one of the options that she had to earn money.
Yeah,
at the
very
tr-
limited choices, limited
Mm,
opportunities.
mhm.
And I think that's one of the things that I wish that Cherie Jones would have gotten a little bit more into was Mira's backstory. We know a little bit, but not a whole lot. We don't know exactly how she got into her line of work before
right,
she married Peter Whalen.
Well, she had a legitimate job as well, you
as
know.
Oh
She
yeah,
was
well.
that's
Yes,
right.
working.
Yeah, she was a
Work
perfume counter
downtown.
girl, well,
she
right?
was
Yes.
working at the
Hmm.
big
Yeah, she worked in
department
Cape
store.
Shepherd's.
But it wasn't
Exactly.
earned. It wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I pictured it as soon it wasn't
Yes.
was it named? I don't think she named it, but
No, she
It
didn't name
sounded
it,
like
but
but
Cape
I
I was
Shepherd's.
like,
pictured
oh
it
It sounded
sounded
yeah,
like
like
Cape
it.
you know,
Shepherd's.
we all knew it was Cape Shepherd, which no longer exists, by the way.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
Roger, if I may, as Paula has identified another theme, and I earlier Francine did the same thing when she spoke about not Francine, sorry, Kesawa did the same thing when she spoke about the tourism dynamics of that industry and how she turned it sort of on its head. So what I really found brilliant about this book is all those themes that are running through around the central or parallel to the central thread of the story. And to be honest, I was more absorbed in some of those parallel themes than the actual central theme itself. Okay. Especially the tourism bit. The bit is, I am a bit familiar with Barbados, and so I've seen that play out. I've seen the whole beach, then nightclub, gigolo um, interactions with the tourists, and but what I liked about it is that those characters were given their backstories
Hmm.
were brought
Mhm,
central to the book. Okay, and I
mhm,
think that's what maybe some agents um, find a little offensive about the book because we're not supposed to discuss the ugly
Right.
side.
right.
Okay, and so I like that theme, and I also like the theme about the economic dependence, which is very common in that class structure.
Mm.
So brilliant book, to be honest with you. And I know you didn't ask that question yet, Roger, but you all are mentioning themes, and I thought that was a good feature of the book.
And I actually just had I don't know, I read the book twice and this completely escapes me. There's a parallel in the book that I hadn't picked up on before between Mira and Sheba.
Oh yes,
Wow. I don't get the parallel. Oh, hang
Sheba,
on, hang on. Let me think. Let me
that
think.
is
No, no.
true.
she,
It's the
yes,
professional parallel.
the
A
professional
professional parallel.
parallel.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah, no, I got
Yeah.
that.
right.
They were
Yeah,
both in the same
it
line of business.
they right.
Yes.
And that completely escaped me until just like a few minutes ago when we were discussing Mira, which just goes to show you how many levels there are to this
And
book.
another parallel I noticed was Wilma and Mira's mother. These two traditional women who just accept the world as they find, try to fix
Is Paula's? Is it me?
their daughters. that they should also accept the world as they find it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
But yeah, I get that. Definitely with Mira's mother, but it seems that Wilma has a scheme that's under the surface. I don't know. Maybe that's the way I read it. That she's a scheme under the surface that bubbles up every now and then. Um, because yeah, I mean, she definitely knew what she was gonna do with that money. In fact, she knew that in time she was gonna get Carson's money. Um, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, I get that. You definitely. I mean, we can really dive into Wilma, hopefully in a little bit. But
I think this might be a good time to dive into Wilma because I think I think
Yeah.
I think the story of Wilma would be a good backstory to the reading that we will get at some point, because some people from other discussions on the book that I've had, some people seem to think that Wilma's upbringing and life could give her a pass for the way she treated others. I tend not to fully agree with that. What do you others what do you others say?
Castle, go
Kesua?
ahead. You're muted though, Castle.
Let me take this one. I don't think so I wouldn't say the way she was raised is the reason for the way she was. I wouldn't say that. I think the trauma she experienced had a lot to do with what came next. And I think we have to I think so I've been in previous discussions about this book as well. And I also think and I do think, sorry, that people have been really harsh on Wilma. Like this girl was 14 years old, essentially sold into marriage. Sorry, that's not a spoiler. Um, and like in the 1950s, like
Mm.
what like options was she looking at really for the kind of life she could live? And not just to any man, not to some kindly guy that would kind of do the right thing and work hard and look after the family that they created, to a man that we kind of get the impression is actually a pedophile. He's 20 years older than her. And you know, and it's clearly the demon villain character of this book.
Mm.
So I think, like, on the one hand, and also, I also think one thing I'd love us to get into a little bit if we have the chance is to think about parenting mores. Because if there's anything I would criticize about the book, I think this is this impression that like middle class parents in the 1980s, men in particular, were engaged in child rearing and looking after and very present, loving fathers. And I think parenting, in my experience, has changed a lot in the last 40 years. And what was expected of a good parent in the 1980s is not necessarily what is expected now. And
Mm.
vice versa, right? We expect things of men as parents today that we weren't expecting in the 1980s, I would argue. And certainly not in the flipping 1950s when like Wilma was having her children. So I'm not on hashtag Team Wilma, but I do think there's space
So,
to
Kessa,
like have some growth.
I want to ask you: are you saying that Wilma's way of treating these, what I call difficult situations in her life, were just a matter of expediency? She had to do. Her options were limited. Um, what?
I'm
Mhm.
okay. So one of the things she does, for example, she tries to protect her daughter in a move that looks like it could be child abuse. Um,
Mhm.
but it is a genuine and sincere attempt to protect her from the dense danger that she senses. Now, that traumatizes her daughter in its own way. We later realize that she was absolutely right, danger was afoot, and her daughter did need protecting.
Mhm.
When she finds out she can't protect her, she doesn't react in a way that I think we would hope.
Mhm.
But we also know that we don't know a lot about her life actually. I think that I mean when we interview Cherie, I'm going to ask for the previews. We need the prequel, like what happened in that marriage. We don't know a lot, but I'm not answering your question, am I, Tony? Sorry. What am I don't think she's without. I think it's easy to blame her for a lot of the things that happen later, and I think that's unfair. I think it's a lot of that blame should be on Carson. Actually, he's absolved of too much because of the role that
How
Wilbur plays back to
I
him.
see a
so
lot
on?
of
Sorry.
Wilmas. I see a lot of Wilmas in my own society, right?
Mm.
Where these women are doing things not because it's the best thing to do, but it's the most expedient thing to do, right? um, women have the burden of rearing the children. You all have identified that because you all mentioned about the absent fathers. And as you rightly say, Kesso, even in the middle class and classes above the middle class, males not necessarily present. So don't just be too hard on the lower class, right? The, where the lower class feels it more is the fact that the economic options are very very limited. So um, they can't buy themselves out of the absence of the male character, right? The male influence. But I see a lot of Wilmas. Women have to do what they have to do to rear their children and their grandchildren and their nieces because all of this becomes a burden. Um, yes, you can criticize her for knowing better and maybe not doing better in certain instances. Okay. But in the main, I think Wilma was just being expedient.
I think I'm sorry, Fazine, I'm just going to finish this off because I probably what I should probably say is I think I have a lot more sympathy for what happens with her and Esme than what happens with her and Lala. I
Mm,
probably should make that clear. Like with Lala, I can see that she's much more to blame for a lot of what happens.
mhm.
Um, yeah,
I was going to say that can we say that she knew better though? I think that is the crux of the thing. Like we're saying she did what was easier or more expedient, but she knew better. I don't think she knew better.
I
How
don't.
how would she have known better? Where would she have known better from?
Mm.
Like Kesoa said, she knew she needed to protect Esme and Lala. She did the same with Lala actually.
Mm.
She protected them in the same way. But I don't know what more would she have known that she could have done.
Yeah.
She was married at 14, so that means like educational level wise, she would have left school if she even had gone to school.
So
Like
what? So ostracizing Lala, how do you excuse that? Um,
Well, she would have been ostracized herself, wouldn't she? At 14, she's married off to this man.
right,
No,
I'm
She's
wondering.
no,
not
no,
a
she wasn't
fully.
ostracized. She was sold off. That's a totally different thing.
But the result, I
What
think
I
I
mean
think
is
the result of it was
When
ostracization.
so she wasn't
exactly, yeah.
ostracized.
No, but what I mean,
Um,
but as Eric says, I think she is cut off from any sort of community that she would as an adult. Oh no, let me not say that. What
She's
I
a
mean is
teenager,
she
no,
didn't,
adolescent.
but she's a wife. You know,
Hmm.
her job is to be in the home,
Mm,
day in
14
yeah,
day
years
out,
old.
looking after this man.
14 years
no,
old and
I
a wife to
yeah,
a old to a well, I
a
can't say that
nasty
word
old
on
man.
TV. Yeah, to an old so and so, and
Hmm.
he jumping up and down on her. I mean, to me now, y'all, as we talking about it, it's really reminding me of Color Purple. You know,
Paul, I
yeah,
Yeah.
wasn't talking
but
about
now
Esme though. I
I'm
was talking about
wondering.
Lala.
Carson is
No,
Mister.
no,
I was.
no. I
Go
no.
ahead.
I am not happy with how she treated either Esme or
Mm,
Lala because she abandons both girls. You
mhm.
know, Esme comes to her because she needs help, and she reluctantly allows her to stay a night, and then she starts pushing her out, and she knows Esme needs her. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Wilma. I know that Wilma had a hard life, but Wilma is not my favorite.
She's not my favorite. I have to be honest. I also have a grandma that bears a striking resemblance to Wilma, and so I have like a certain soft spot for her because I know how she's a terrible old person, but she was a great grandma to me. But
But
I
we
can
all know Wilma. We all know Wilma.
so I think I have a weird soft spot for her and a character that if I didn't know a character like that, I'd be like, what an evil person. So I have to kind of recognize
Yeah,
that myself.
yeah,
I'm not unbiased, I think.
yeah.
But
My initial feeling was, oh, she's awful. But on reflection, yes, we all know someone like that,
and she
right?
does her I think she does her best, and she's just a traumatized person that has had a really hard life and doesn't she's not I think she's has she ever experienced love herself? So how can
No.
she then reflect it back
Mm.
to anybody else if she's never
Yes.
received it and given it freely and openly and enjoyed it?
That is a
I,
fair.
I think that's my issue with her. I think like she's
And
not
yeah,
living a full human life in lots of ways. And so to expect her to have compassion and kindness is probably just a stretch too far.
And
Yeah.
also, has she ever, we live in a world now where pretty much regardless of how you grew up, you can see other possibilities, right? You can
Hmm.
see that, yeah, maybe I can actually, hey,
Hmm.
I can do but she would not have seen any examples of her
Yeah.
doing anything different,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Except for in
This
Hollywood films. They
this
didn't
might
even
be
see
a
that.
good
right,
time.
yes, but but in the Hollywood films, she wouldn't be seeing people like her.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah. This might be a good time to find out about a traumatic experience that Wilma's granddaughter faced in the story. We'll now take a read in from Cherie Jones herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cherie Jones, author of How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. And I'm saying a special hello today to all the viewers of IKTV in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, if you haven't yet had the opportunity to read the novel, How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House is the story of Lala, a woman who makes a living braiding hair on the beach in Barbados, and she's married to a man by the name of Aiden, who happens to be a career criminal. How the One Armed Sister Sweeps Her House is starts with when Aiden and Lala have their first baby, and on the same night that this baby is born, there is a gruesome murder of a tourist who lives in one of the huge mansions, luxurious mansions, slightly higher up along the beach. And the novel is really about how those two events are connected, the birth of Lala's baby and the death of this tourist. So I'm going to read an extract for you, and it's from very close to the beginning of this story. At this point in time, Aiden has brought a visitor home to their house on the beach to see this new baby. He's very proud of their baby and he wants to show her off to this visitor. And his wife, Lala, is not as pleased um, at this visitor coming to see her baby. And as you will hear, that episode has disastrous consequences. So I'll just go ahead and read a little bit of it for you. When Jacinth reaches out to take baby from Aiden, to join him in hugging and holding and cooing over how beautiful she is, Lala strides over and says she must feed baby first. It is past time for her feeding. She lifts baby from Aiden's hands before he can respond, straightens baby's pale yellow smocked dress, and obscures her navel again. The baby, startled by the sudden loss of admiration and the sound and sight of her father's fawning, threatens a cry, but Lala pays no heed. Perhaps it is the tenderness with which Aiden retrieves baby from her arms before she can fetch the bottle and proffers her again to Jacinth. Perhaps it is the maternal madness that epilogues a recent birth. Perhaps it is that they're both a little house mad from being locked inside, Aiden in the tunnels and Lala inside with baby, because they have to be careful. They cannot afford for Aiden to be seen. Perhaps it is everything that came before it, or nothing in particular, but whatever it is that makes Lala not understand what she is starting, it is a costly deficit. Everything deteriorates. Aiden lowers his eyes from Jacint's but does not look at Lala. He looks at the ground as the sound is sucked out of the room. Gimme back, baby, is what he says to Lala. I gotta feed she, Lala protests. Tone stops squeezing his locks, closes the window against the rain. It getting ready to clear up, he says. We gone here, Aiden. Gotta get this girl home before it come down properly. Give me back, baby, Aiden insists. Jacinth jumps up, relieved to have received the sight from Tone to go. She says to Aiden that it is okay. She will come back to visit some other time. She will see baby again there. Let her have her feed. She look hungry in truth. It's okay, Aiden. Lala holds baby closer, feels her stiffen and start to claw, refusing to be drawn into her own mother's bosom. Aiden, insistent, tugs baby back while sucking his teeth. A custard colored booty falls onto the hard wooden floor and does not bounce. Aiden is holding on to a little naked foot, and baby wails again. Aiden is twisting the baby's legs away from Lala. Jacinth is heading towards the door. Tone is approaching Lala and Aiden as they start to move with the baby suspended between them. Lala reclaims both legs. Aiden moves his big hands to baby's torso and tries to lift the baby out of Lala's arms. Jacinth has reached the door, is putting on her sandals. Tone stands behind her, takes up much of the space in the doorway, keeps the light out, blocks the sight of Aiden and Lala struggling over baby. Thunder grumbles and barks. Baby jumps, and both parents realize at once that this right of possession is scaring her. Neither wishes to scare her. Perhaps this is why Lala lets go of the little legs at the precise moment that Aiden lets go of the torso, and baby plummets to the floor in a flailing plumage of pale yellow and chocolate and lands with a soft thump and is silent.
Welcome back. And just before we took the reading from Cherie Jones, we were talking a lot about Wilma and her relationship with her relatives and how that was portrayed in the story. One thing that I want to touch on now is the way that Cherie Jones deals with a lot of taboo topics in the Caribbean. She covers prostitution, um, you know, both with women and men. And I particularly, I think it focused heavily on men for me, which I liked. And we also have incest being covered and a wide range of taboo topics. How how did you find this? Did you find it really uncomfortable for you to read, or did you appreciate that a book finally addressed these taboo topics in the Caribbean? Um, Francine.
Both, like,
Mm,
it was hard to read, especially since it seemed kind of relentless, like you almost didn't get a break from the trauma. But I also felt that the way that she wrote it was just, it's so written in a way that, I don't know, like, you understood that you were reading something really terrible, but you didn't feel yourself necessarily traumatized by it. At least that was my take of it.
Mm.
So yeah, there were many uncomfortable parts in the story, but at the same time, I really appreciated it that she did discuss these topics that most people tend to shy away from addressing, um, especially as it relates to the Caribbean, because, like we said, she touched on the underbelly of tourism. And, when people think about the Caribbean and they thinking of the sun, the sand, the beach, good, everybody's so happy, and then life is so wonderful there. In fact, it's funny because there's a meme going around that I saw recently that said something like, oh, it would be 10 times easier to wake up in the morning if it was 85 degrees and there was a Caribbean sea outside. And I'm like, not if you're like an average Caribbean person. In fact, no, not everyone is happy to wake up in the Caribbean. So yes, I really do appreciate that she addressed these things that are taboo.
and
And I
I
think even us as Caribbean people, we like to, some of us like to, like, have this image, like, not project to other people that in fact, no, life is, not not good all the time for everybody who lives there.
I was literally just about to touch on that because I think that's why, as Tony mentioned, there are people who are very critical of Sherry's book because there are people in the Caribbean who like to think of it purely as paradise. I mean, it is paradise in some aspects, but there are aspects of it that are dark and upsetting.
Right.
So I
No,
think I,
I
I
get
was I
that.
was glad that Sherry covered it.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And right. I mean, I can walk about. I've traveled to Barbados and walking along the road and looking, and the Caribbean is just to my left, and people their backyard. They're small houses, but their backyards are right on the Caribbean. I'm saying, wow, these people are spoiled. That they got the sea right there. But again, I'm never a tourist. I'm always a traveler. There's a big difference. So
Mhm.
I rub elbows with the folk because yeah, when I'm in any Caribbean space, I am the folk. You know, so I get that, and yeah, I mean, I wasn't so I was intrigued with Tone and his at least part of his operation. Um, I think I was more disturbed with the incest. Obviously, I was more disturbed with the incest, and yeah, taken aback because I did not. I don't read any blurbs, anything before I get into a book. I want to be surprised, and this book definitely surprised me with going into some areas that um, tend to be unexplored and exposes stuff that will make people uncomfortable, especially
Mm.
Caribbean folk, very uncomfortable. It's like, how
Air
dare
our dirty laundry.
exposes
Mm.
us? Yeah, hanging our dirty drawers out in the sunshine for all people to see.
My only concern is that one may, at the end of reading that book, may just leave it at the um, the tone and the Aiden class structure, and think that incest and that sort of thing just resides there, and that's not true, right? We need to not walk away from the book thinking that that sort of phenomenon does not exist in the other classes as well. And it's so easy to come away with that stereotype, And that's just a little area of concern for me.
Yeah.
But then
Speaking of
I
stereotypes, sorry.
oh no no
Speaking
I
of stereotypes,
go ahead.
I just wanted to mention there. I had a little bit of a concern with there are two Indian characters, two people. Well, one of Indian descent apparently, and another of Indian extraction in the novel. And in both cases, these men were treated. There was negative stereotypes. And I worried about that. I wonder if the author noticed that she was doing it, because sometimes you can do that and not notice. But it worried me, and I just thought it's something I should mention, that I didn't see, I didn't understand why that was done. But it is something I have concerns about. Yep.
But then you know, I guess as we're speaking about slight concerns, as Tony mentioned, we sort of get in the novel that the problems that the 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 men in the, I don't know, the higher classes, I don't want to use that term, but the problems that they have seem so minuscule compared to the problems that Tone and Aiden and the other families have. I don't know if that was deliberate or unintentional, but it seems to perpetuate a sort of idea of Caribbean people, I think, and maybe that's why people in Barbados are upset. I don't know.
I think it's a common feature of the society where you would have a behavior type in a certain class of person. They're penalized for it. They're criticized for it. And rightly so. Okay. But then you move up the class structure and the same thing, but it is softened. It is hidden. It is not penalized and critiqued as much. And I think that is the issue. It's very easy to beat up on Tone and um, Aiden and whoever else, Wilma even, you know. But if you move that behavior up the class structure, it may not be as shocking, or you wouldn't even know about it, you know. And I think that is the issue.
Okay, now that I think about that, I think I think we could read between the lines on in one example that I'm thinking of right now. It's Myra's father. All right. There's not a lot of time spent on that relationship, but we know that old boy kind of pushes us to the side once he gets he gets what, another wife or another woman, and he has other children, and she's pushed to the side because what he marries a white woman, right?
Hmm.
It's,
I thought the opposite. We had an argument about this in book club, and I don't want to start it again.
yeah,
I think I
but
got some of the ethnicities a bit mixed up.
yeah, I mean, it seemed like yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. But y'all can correct me if I'm wrong if the woman was not white or was white, but definitely there. What I'm saying is that this man, going with Tony's point, um, was not penalized because of what he did, at least in the text. But can we say that Mara wasn't penalized? Because we haven't talked about her trauma. We haven't talked about her trauma and how that affected her course in life. You know, so I think that's a big section of the text that in the previous discussion, these that we kind of glossed over. And I don't want us to gloss over that because Mara she's central to the story, obviously. And she's got some stuff that she's dealing. I mean, she's big time stuff that she's dealing with. And she too. Her daddy abandoned her. You know, her daddy abandoned her.
And then in the story, wasn't she sort of, well, she was like the outside child, and her father was basically treating her like a pet. He would come around a few minutes per day and, give a little play, sort of like what you do with an animal, to be honest. So I think that's the backstory for her, why she ended up the way she ended up. For me, that's the backstory that I got.
But
Yeah,
there's a lot of privilege being assumed in that whole thing with Myra and so on. They but it's real because in these societies, let's talk about Barbados as the book is based on Barbados, or about Barbados. The local whites, if you want to call them that. I know Keswa has these. You're meticulous about the grading color, but they're local whites. That's how we that's how we refer to them. You know, they have a certain amount of privilege, which I see coming through in the novel in the way Cherie Jones deals with Myra. Um, the Paul will tell you that a lot of people in Barbados in these plantation societies went to Australia when the blacks started to move up notches, when the aspiring middle class in the blacks started to actually get there. So these people were like, you know, the privilege doesn't work for me anymore. So let me move somewhere else, And I saw things like that coming through. Yes, I agree with you, Eric, that there's quite a bit of trauma that Mara has to deal with, but it's not the same reality as Wilma and Lala and Tone and Aiden. It's society does not give them that leeway as they give, um, you know, Myra and people of her type.
And
isn't
just
there?
on that same point, Martha, who is a Redlegs Bajan, who, because she is Redlegs, is her status, she doesn't have high status, but she gets a job. She gets a job with Mira's father because she is white. And Mira's father is very proud of having a white subordinate. So he puts her in the front office and he introduces her to people as, see that white lady? She works for me, and you have to come through her to get to me. So, it's complex. Martha, she accepts her subordinate status because of her economic origins, but her whiteness gives her access to upward mobility that she would not have unless she were white. So I just wanted to endorse what Tony was saying.
Yeah, and I think going back to Cherie Jones's narrative, all of what you're discussing there um, tells me how brilliant this book is, because there are so many things going on in it. We can do 6 discussions on this, picking up different themes. There's so much going on, and I think, in fairness to her, and the people who are criticizing her, I would like to tell them that, look, Cherie Jones wrote that as a snapshot, as a photograph of the society as it is. And I'm going to defend on that.
And another thing to add to that too is if somebody writes a work of fiction and you find that it bothers you so much, then it means that you actually have a problem. That's just me. Because if somebody writes fiction and you think it applies so much to your life that you could recognize that it's worth criticism, I think you have a problem.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, no, I agree. I think I agree with both Tony and Roger. It's a snapshot, and it holds a light. It shines a light on these issues, and if you read the book and you're like, what? How dare she? Blah, blah, blah," sit with that discomfort and really think about why it makes you uncomfortable instead of immediately launching in criticism. Yeah, I agree.
I think it's more complex than that. Um, I think if we're honest, and we're an honest kind of panel here, we know that for many people they've been taught from young, and I think Cherie Jones has talked about this, about not upsetting the tourists and how that will have a direct impact on our economy as a Caribbean island dependent on tourism, right? So people have been groomed, primed, inculcated from young with the idea that we don't say bad things about tourists or tourism, right? Which is one of the reasons why A Small Place was so kind of explosive, where she talks back to the tourist in ways that you're not supposed to. So if people have had that training, teaching for many, many years, by the time they're an adult and Cherie Jones is out here airing all the dirty laundry of tourism, of course, for some people, this is going to be offensive. It goes against what we've been taught to say in public about tourism in detail.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you hitting it right on the head.
Yeah,
And
but I
coming from a
was
place of tourism, I know. Maybe there was some tourists. There was some, well, put it plainly, there was some white tourists some years ago who were alone and touring a cemetery um, near some housing projects in New Orleans. I mean, the big famous cemetery where Marie Laveau is buried, and they out there by themselves. They get jacked and they get killed. Now, local people are like, "Hey, that's bad," but why are they out there by themselves? They should know better. They should know better. So we can say certain things about tourism like in ourselves, but we or tourists by ourselves, but we don't want that out because we know that we are dependent upon those tourist dollars. I don't even live in the city anymore, but I hear people talk about, oh, I'm going to New Orleans, what should I do? I said, first of all, thank you for pumping money into my economy. I still got a stake down there. Yeah. So we don't want to say things that are going to upset people. We want people to come. And when crime always happens there. The powers that be, they get on it as fast as they could to protect the industry, not particularly to protect the people who are victimized by the violence. And more than not, the victims, me, my people. So yeah, that's the thing I think that what upset people, but that's the reality when you live in a tourism dependent economy.
So I just wanted to say that when I talked about, the things that the book exposed and people should should sit with the discomfort, I wasn't speaking just about, the tourism aspect. I was talking about all the other themes that she explored in the book, the generational trauma, the class differences. That's the kind of stuff I was more referring to, actually. I do understand why people don't want to, bad things said about the island for the tourism part. But I was more thinking about, no, we need to look at the issues that affect the different classes in the island.
And I think that's another thing that I appreciate about this book. Again, I mean, I've been to Barbados, so I have an idea about the tourism. Been across the Caribbean, and have a really good idea about the tourism, and then having that touchstone about my own context. Um, I, I I continue to go back to Hurricane Katrina. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and everybody's flooded out, who was left behind? The nation, the world saw who were the underclass in that city that people always talk about, oh, the Mardi Gras, blah, 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 da, 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 da. Who left behind? Who floating in the water? It's black folk trapped in their attics and in their roofs. Who couldn't get out the city? It was black folks who were too poor to have access to transportation. And I think that's a parallel to what Cherie Jones has exposed in this text, and that we've already touched upon. It's this underside, this underbelly of a place that's seen as paradise. But for the people who live their lives there and have been there for generations, and brought there by on slave ships, it's a different type of reality. Different type of reality. And we're the ones who suffer in ways that the rest of the world are unable to see.
I want to throw this out to this distinguished panel. I'm giving you all a lot of ratings this morning, but just leading on from what Eric is saying, the tourism model, okay, as described in Cherie Jones's novel, okay, where tourists come, they lay on the beach, they rum punch and enjoy the sun, and then they go to the nightclubs at night and so on. Now, for that to work, you must have either you must have tones and lalas and so on, because they are supporting that, eh? They're supporting that, but it's a low life. Are we saying that the authorities, i.e., the government, the policymakers, turn a blind eye to that and just are more interested in the economic returns of from the tourists that come there? But I mean, I'm imploring you to look at the structure. If Lala didn't exist, tourists wouldn't get their hair braided on the beach. Okay, if tone didn't exist, there wouldn't be that sex tourism element, the gigolo element. Okay, but these people, by virtue of what they do, are represented as low life people. Isn't there some hypocrisy here?
Definitely. But I also think when the policymakers are thinking about tourism, they're not worried about. Actually, you know what? I'm not an expert on tourism policy. Let me be quiet.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear Paula's view, because Paula and I chat a lot offline on these things. So I want to pull you out, Paula.
I don't know. Well, I don't know that I have a properly formulated view, but I know that you are concerned, that you seem to think, Tony, that tourism causes prostitution. I come from Kingston, Jamaica, and we have a street called Knutsford Boulevard, which is our red light street. And the patrons of the people who sell services on Knutsford Boulevard are locals. Um, Prostitution exists in every society. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there is no formal prostitution, but I see prostitution all over the place. It's just that it's socially acceptable. So I don't know that I know that the tourism model that we have in the Caribbean um, encourages the kind of prostitution that, say, Tone engages in and the Queen of Sheba engages in. Um, but I don't know that tourism causes it. It just gives sex workers a means of earning a better living.
And
That's my 2 cents worth.
it provides a bigger market, I suppose. But I agree with you, Paula. It prostitution still will exist, or would exist if the tourism economy was not a reality. But I just feel though that that thing where we these people are victims of their circumstances. I'm talking about the Tones and the um, Wilmers and so on. They're victims of their circumstances, and they're forced to survive in the mainstream economy, which is tourism, and that is what they have to offer as their services. And that's the part I am having difficulties dealing with. How do you lift up these people? How do you get them out of that? Okay, if you're just going to settle your mind on tourism being the answer to your GDP, right? But these
Well,
people are still remaining trapped. That
at
is
this
my, yeah.
at this point, Tony, then I think it's really important to reflect on two things. First, that this is a historical novel. This is historical fiction. This is not set in the present day. It's worth mentioning to our readers. It's set in the 1980s, which I think Cherie Jones has said is kind of because it's kind of a high point, right? It's before I think we have the what's the word, the preferential things that happened in the 90s. It's before structural adjustment has really started to really destroy economies in the Caribbean. And so as I understand it, she's kind of pointing out a very particular time period. And I don't know that that model that was kind of that those characters were experiencing at that time is as, and I say I don't know because I don't know if it's as prevalent in the present. So I'm thinking particularly of in Barbados, for example, Mia Motley's talking about building creative economies and really supporting them and diversifying. You know, people have talked about um, the tourism being as, in some respects, as what's the word I'm looking for? Unpredictable, unreliable, as fragile a market as bananas or sugarcane once were. You know, it's the same kind of issues are prevalent in that. And so moving away from tourism dependent economies, in which case, yeah, I don't know if when we rethink about if in the Caribbean we're rethinking our economic policy in quite broad strokes, in quite major ways, then perhaps those issues of who is going to benefit from whatever economic model the future holds, maybe that's going to be more central to it. I say maybe because I'm not involved in policy making, and I would hope. But I wanted to say other thing, which is sort of linked but not, but sort of is. I think at the heart of this novel is love. I think this novel is about how love can transcend a situation, how it can enable a person to transcend a situation, but also how love deformed can also create a host of problems that impact generations. I think the main theme of the story is not actually the political themes that we've raised. I think the story is really about love and how humans live with or without it.
Why am I not surprised that you find it?
I just say I do.
our,
I think that's
Because
our,
the heartbeat
And
of the
so I
our,
novel.
have
our
something to offer you. I
romanticists.
have a suggestion to offer. Love is political.
because
Ooh.
yeah, because the thing is, I don't think I saw love as being a very pure theme in this at all. I don't know.
I don't know.
Well,
It does.
Kessa
It
I
was
think
our
does. It's
Kesua.
central.
Juliet on this panel, eh?
There's a love story. There's a love story involved here between Lala and Tone. I mean, it runs through most of the novel, and it basically ends Oh, sorry. It runs true. I felt it. I don't know. Maybe Ketchum and I are the only romantics
on the panel. But also,
here.
it's not, as Eric said, it's not an imagination thing. I needed some light in the novel because you talked about a lot of the darkness. No, it's the heartbeat of the novel. It begins and ends
I
with the
agree.
chapters of their story. And, without any spoilers, like that's the structure of
Yeah,
the novel.
I
Eh?
agree, and I think that the way that you phrased it is important. It's not just a love story. It's like how people who have love were able to transcend their trauma, and how people who didn't have love, how that affected them. So yeah, I mean, it's not a romance novel, but there's definitely a love story.
Well, I
And that's the
suppose
redemption arc, I think, as well, right? That's the redemption, because I think we've talked about a lot of the heaviness in the novel, but it's actually a joy to read, right? We all enjoyed the novel, we all loved it, and I think that's because of the way it's written, but also because it's got those two aspects of humanity, the light and the darkness. And the love story is a very sweet love story. It's a very kind of pure and innocent and good love story amidst all of the darkness that we've already discussed. And I think it's worth saying that she gets the balance spot on, if you ask me, because those of you who are the cold hearts of stone couldn't feel it when it was there the whole time. For those of us who look for the light in life.
well, I like the novel as well. So Heart of Stone on that. I do like the novel. I'm intrigued that my friend Paula was morbidly afraid of picking the book up because of what she sensed might have been depressing and overly depressing. There were some heavy themes, heavy topics in that, and frankly speaking, I think there were some gross descriptions of certain things, and I'm not going to do the spoilers, but the balance, guess what, was definitely spot on. I agree. You know.
And there was some humor. There was some humor. There were parts in this text that I was laughing out loud and belly laughing and thinking about things that my daddy had said and thinking about my grandparents. I mean, the whole uh, washing off of Carson. Man, that was hilarious. I don't know how anybody could not read that and not laugh at that. And there was this one section, if I can be indulged for just a second, when Wilma and Lala go to clean the white woman's house on the beach, and Wilma tells you know not to do number two in that woman's house. I was like, whoa, that's, I remember getting the same type of counseling from my daddy. He said, "You do that at your own house." I was like, "What is this, a cultural thing or what?" Oh, I did the nods, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There were quite a few parts that, like, the West Indian life and the West Indian humor just really came out at me. And there was the description of the guy who, don't want to give too much away, but there was one section about one of Aiden's friends, the one who was selling coconut water, and the interactions that he had with the different people. I found that hilariously funny. And like, I was like, yeah, man, this is just like so us, this type of thing. And so yeah, it really captured a lot of the different little segments and little vignettes of Caribbean life, West Indian life. So yeah, that was great.
Absolutely. I will jump in and say one of the things I think we haven't talked about is the skill she has as a writer to bring such a host of characters to us. There are so many different people, but it doesn't feel like you're meeting them quickly. Although I said I want a prequel, and I do want that prequel, but I also wouldn't mind a sequel. Like I just feel there's more here. There are so many interesting characters, and she has a real eye for the character description. You really get a sense of who this person is in a very few. I mean, I think she talks about being a short story writer, and so you get to see a lot of a character in a very short space of space, and that really, I think, is a gift for the novel, because you see a real community, lots of different people from different social classes, different ethnic groups, different backgrounds, all inhabiting the same space, this Baxter's Beach.
And
And you get a sense of all of them, and it's really brilliant. Yeah.
and Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, but I think one thing that we could end on is for each person to tell us their favorite character and why, especially coming off of what Kesua said in terms of how she developed a lot of the characters. Or did you find any characters who were underdeveloped in the story? Anything about characters, take it away. Tony, you want to take the first bite because you're the first on my screen.
Yeah, I don't even know if I found a favorite character. Um, Tone I liked because I know that kind of character, and Cherie Jones was actually able to put him in the pages in a way that I transposed myself to Barbados, and I was on the beat seeing the Tone, and I'm in the nightclub seeing the same Tone, having done his day stuff, now playing his night trade, So I kind of Eric is laughing, but if you ask me, if you push me, I I liked Tone, and I think he was a soft guy in comparison to Aiden, and that yes, guess what? That was the romance side here, the relationship that he had. Am I allowed to say what relationship he had? Is that a spoiler? I don't know, but it is established fairly early anyway. That yes, Roger Tone. If I must give you a favorite character,
Okay, Paula. I know Paula's gonna have multiple. uh,
I think Paul is having some internet issues. Go ahead, Paul, if you're on.
No, no, no. I am. Can you hear me? Because I
yes.
am having
Yes.
terrible internet issues. Um, Aiden was the character I thought I needed to see more developed. I didn't understand what made Aiden a monster. I didn't think I got enough information to explain why Aiden was without the possibility of redemption. Because I know, I mean, I've worked with criminal offenders. I have met very few that I thought were beyond redemption. And I didn't get any, the novel didn't tell me why Aiden was such a horrible human being. I would have liked that. I would have liked to get more information on that.
Interesting perspective, Eric.
Like Tony, Tone was definitely my favorite character. Um, I mean, I'm not gonna say that I would have I approve of his nighttime dalliances, but the brother did what he had to do in that situation. But he was he was multidimensional, very multidimensional, as Cherie Jones depicted him, and he was a romantic, which is interesting. Um, he could separate his business from real love and romance. And I think Cherie Jones did that adroitly and expertly. And I was rooting for Tone. That's the thing. Whoever I'm rooting for, that's basically my favorite character. Not to say I wasn't rooting for Lala, because I was definitely rooting for Lala, and I felt, oh my goodness, I felt her pain, the depths of my soul. But I did feel that Tone was the one I was rooting for the most. So Tone's my favorite.
Francine.
Yeah, so I had a lot of sympathy for Lala. I wish that I had gotten to know Esme a bit more because I think there was definitely room for redemption there. But definitely, I think Tone would probably be my favorite. Just be well. I'm not going to repeat what Eric and Tony said, but yeah. And if I might
Yeah.
give Paula my opinion on Aiden, I think he was just a sociopath. He was born that way. He was horrible as a child, and he continued to be horrible.
And Kesua.
I'm gonna go for the left field option and say my favorite character is probably Esme. She's a character we don't see a lot of, but I think in this whole conversation about generational trauma that the book provokes, she's the character who transcends her own pain and creates love, and I think that's admirable, and interesting and powerful, and so she's my favorite.
And I think my favorite is Aiden, but not for the reasons outlined before. Because one thing we didn't discuss, and I didn't discuss in any previous book clubs, was that I see Aiden as the last bastion fighting neocolonialism. Aiden had a house on the beach in paradise. I don't think anyone considered that. And he was robbing tourists on the beach that he lived on in paradise. Make of that what you want. Yes, he was a criminal, but he was fighting people who were encroaching on the beach in paradise. That is all I'll say on that.
Hang on, no, 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 no. How much? We need more time. We need more time. You're gonna paint Aiden as some Robin Hood character. Lord have mercy on my spirit.
Part two coming up.
Yeah, this book is deserving of a part two. It's a pity we can't do that.
I had to I have to end the show with a bit of controversy. That's why I did that. But we want to thank all the viewers for staying with us. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting Page Turners Plus. Coming up shortly, we'll have an interview with the author of this book, Cherie Jones. So do look out for that. And in our next edition of Patroners Plus, where we actually review a book, we'll be doing When We Were Birds by Ayana Lloyd Banwo. And if you want to follow us, in terms of, you could read the book and you could submit questions to Page Turners Plus or any member of Page Turners Plus, and we would ask and answer your questions in our next program. Thank you once again for tuning in, and do have a lovely day.